Greetings, everyone. Happy Monday night here on the Wolverine.com's YouTube channel or in the in the Wolverine.com podcast feed. If you're listening to us after the fact, it is Monday night, September 25th, here on another victory week, so to speak. We're going to get used to having a lot of those this year, but the first one in Big Ten play is in the books. Anthony Broom here with Clayton Safey. Chris Ballas not with us tonight, but a little bonus for you guys watching on YouTube. The new episode of Ballas and Skeen, a little bit delayed from yesterday, will premiere on our YouTube channel right after we're done here. So a little PSA on that. But Clayton, welcome in. And before we get started, I have to ask, did you see that Taylor Swift was at the Chiefs game yesterday? I don't know if you saw it or heard about it.
Did you see the Hutchinson family was also at the Lions game? Yeah,
they were.
I don't know. I think T Swift got a little more airtime, but yeah, you were at the Lions game as well. Great weekend of NFL, and then just a great day of college football on Saturday too. So I'm excited. It's crazy we're already in week 5, but I did see that Taylor Swift was also in the locker room after the game too.
Yeah, she and apparently left her suite in a popcorn machine or something like that. But interesting. Another wild football Sunday. These are the best. This is the best time of the year. Got a loaded slate on Saturday that mostly lived up to the hype. Sunday NFL, nothing wrong with that at all. It's cool to even be there in person, but a lot to get to today, including a discussion about toughness and tough football teams and who is a tough football team and who's trying to speak toughness into existence. We'll also talk, give some final thoughts on Michigan's game against Rutgers, a Monday press conference that we went to today. First road trip of the year coming up. Rutgers in the books. Nebraska up this weekend. So a lot to get to. We will get into it, but before we get started, we do have just a little bit of housekeeping to do. And you guys have heard us talk about our friends at Bird Dogs multiple times since they came on as a partner with us. Bird Dogs make you look good. I'm wearing mine right now. Usually, I make it a point to only be videoed from the shoulder up, so I don't want to quite step back and give you the free show here. Got to pay a little extra for that. But Bird Dogs are stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. They fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Bird Dogs uses anti-stink and sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. So, if you head on over to birddogs.com/Wolverine right now, or use the promo code Wolverine, you will get a free Hydro Flask style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/Wolverine, or use promo code Wolverine for your free Hydro Flask style tumbler. When you place an order over there, you're not going to want to take these things off. They're tremendous. They sent, I believe, all of us, including Chris. I believe they sent 2 pairs of shorts and a pair of joggers. They're all great. They all get uses from me, a few times a week. Great asset for us. So head on over to birddogs.com. Use that promo code Wolverine and get your shorts, get the tumbler, and yeah, that's just about all there needs to be said about that. Bird Dogs is awesome. So shout out to Bird Dogs. Shout out to their partnership here on a Monday night. Clayton. I want to lead with what we're going to go into first tonight, because I'll be honest. I mean, you and I could sit here and talk ball all day for multiple hours, break down the minutia of the Rutgers game and, preview, the road trip to Nebraska, which we will do on Thursday. We will preview that game in depth. I don't know that that's going to move the needle for a lot of people. There is one thing that is becoming really apparent to me this season, and that is the fact that I don't think we're going to see this Michigan football team play a bowl caliber team. Maybe Minnesota's a team that could sneak into a bowl, but they crapped the bed over the weekend against Northwestern. The rest of the conference outside of Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State kind of looks like a joke right now. Wisconsin is still kind of up and down and figuring it out under Luke Fickell. But it's one of those things here where we start looking at big picture narratives, because this season is taking, and this is the way it was always going to be, it's taking on a feel of those last 3 games at Penn State, at Maryland, against Ohio State. This kind of coming down to be a 3-game season. with the buildup being ultimately to that game at the end of November. So with that in mind, and all eyes on the Ohio State Buckeyes this week, I don't even know how to set this up other than to say, if you watch that game on Saturday night, I think you have to feel pretty good about where you stack up on any field with Ohio State. The last 2 years are obviously proof of that, but you get to Ryan Day's not even his press conference. He's on the field cutting a WWE promo with, I believe it was Melissa Stark or Catherine Tappan, my bad. And he is sitting here stuffing Lou Holtz in a locker, beating his chest about how tough his football team is. He's red in the face. His voice is cracking with the intensity of your high school algebra teacher coming in and yelling at the class. Ryan Day, Michigan is firmly in the heads of the Ohio State Buckeyes. He's yelling about Lou Holtz. He's stuffing an 86-year-old man in a trash can after the game. Michigan totally owns that program right now. And let's give these guys, again, I'm sure this will show up in someone's hype video for Ohio State week. I'm sure it will show up on someone's message board, maybe not. And I'm not one to take, to come on the air and take unwarranted pot shots, but that should be a game you come out of as an Ohio State fan to say, you know what? We didn't play our best ball, but that's a gritty win against a top 10 team on the road. We had to get 1 yard to win it, which, was made easier by the fact that Notre Dame couldn't get 11 guys on the field. And you come out of it with Ryan Day kind of just, again, you want to see a guy go out and defend his team, but, he comes out and says they've only played one bad half of football the last 2 years. This guy it's like the old line from The Wedding Singer. I wish Chris was here right now. He's losing his mind, and I'm reaping all the benefits. So thoughts on Ryan Day, thoughts on Ohio State, and a guy that, Michigan's just firmly in this guy's head right now. And you could tell, like you could even hear it in his voice. It's like the bullied kid in class who finally gets sick of getting made fun of.
I don't even know where to start after everything you just did on there. But no, I mean, I agree. Like we were texting late on Saturday about it. Like I couldn't believe what I saw. I mean, it was a complete meltdown for 86-year-old Lou Holtz to be in his head was just crazy. I mean, Lou Holtz is a former national championship winning Notre Dame coach. I mean, he said that when Ohio State loses, that the other team's tougher. I don't think that's some huge shot. I mean, I think it's probably also true. It's nothing that, I think that they don't realize themselves. I remember last year he put in all those signs all over the locker room, toughness and physicality. And I'll say if you have to say that you're tough and, go on national TV and say that you're tough, you're probably not that tough. I think tough teams would, people say it about them. They don't need to say it themselves. With that said, I thought Ohio State, that was a very good win for them. And their defense is very good and probably pretty tough as well. But Notre Dame able to run on them a little bit in the second half and just a pretty solid game, defensive slugfest. But man, and the one interesting thing, talking to our friend Isaiah Hull today at the Michigan press conference, is this could be a detriment for Ohio State if he thinks that they're as tough as possible and that they're kind of a complete product in that area. I mean, it might be a detriment to them to think that and go about the rest of the season that way, because they're not going to get tested all that much either until they play Penn State and then Michigan. So, we're really just going to find out at the end of November. I don't know, I couldn't even imagine Jim Harbaugh going on a tirade like that, a complete meltdown. It was kind of embarrassing for Ryan, but it made my Saturday night. It was entertaining. It was good content. I'll give him that.
That's like 2 of the last 3 Saturday nights where I feel like I was kind of sort of snuggled in for the night, and you're watching something on TV or you're scrolling through social media, and then you sit up in bed and gasp. And obviously Mel Tucker stuff was a very different situation, a different kind of exposing who you really are to the world. But the Ryan Day thing, again, it's I'm not, his team played well. I think on offense and defense, they're a little better up front than I think some people were giving them credit for. I know Notre Dame ran on them a little bit, but again, Notre Dame's a good football team too. But God, I mean, let's talk about them for a second too. I mean, you go out there and the last 2 snaps of the game, you can't even get 11 defenders on the field. That is that's Rich Rod and Hoke level stuff. And I hate to say it, but you go out there and do stuff like that. And I feel like that kind of stuff doesn't go away. There are mistakes that happen here and there, but I feel like there have been a couple Notre Dame games the last few years where there's been some kind of just egregious, detailed error that causes them to lose a football game. And listen, again, that was a great game for the most part. I mean, I like those low scoring games, and it's kind of, I know there's been a lot of controversy about the clock rule and what's going on with all that, but something I like about the NFL, not that I want college football to emulate the NFL, is that possessions matter, and what you do with possessions matter. And it makes, down to down what your play calls are on offense and defense. Everything's just more critical when there's just not as many chances to get the football back. And Notre Dame had their chances to win that game on that final drive, dropped an interception. I think there were a couple penalties, obviously the stuff at the end, but I'm not going to sit here and make any grand proclamations about Ohio State. I don't, right now through 4 games, I don't think Kalel McCord is still figuring it out, but not quite the caliber of guy that they've had there. Made some mistakes in that game. And I think the biggest thing about Ohio State right now is when you look at them is they are a Ferrari that's trying to put a snowplow on their, on the vehicle. And it's like, dude, you guys, you don't need to cry and whine about how people don't respect you for being tough. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. I watched Sunday Night Football last night. Devontae Adams gets targeted 18 or 19 times in the game.
On my fantasy team. He's on my fantasy team.
Yes. And there's a comment here that says prevent defense is terrible and no one should ever run it.
Yeah, third and 19.
I tweeted that out. Prevent defense is losing defense. But yeah, Ohio State, I mean, I think, again, I don't want to, this is a Michigan podcast, but when we talk about the buildup to that game, to me right now, the difference is, Michigan looks dominant, but still methodical and still kind of figuring it out. Whereas I think Ohio State, you saw glimpses of what their vintage self was last week. They put up 63 points, but this whole trying to convince the world you're tough instead of just going out there and being about it. I don't know. It's almost like if you're a Michigan fan, you almost want them to have, to hit on Isaiah's point, you almost want them to have that type of bravado instead of being humbled. Because we've seen Ohio State teams lose early in the year before, and then obviously the train gets rolling, you're hitting on all cylinders, and then we see what happens. But I just thought it was interesting to kind of bring up the state of where things are at there. It was obviously a big storyline on Saturday night. Ryan Day yelling about how awesome his Dodge Stratus is. I don't know. Hey, you have any other thoughts on the state of the Ohio State Buckeyes or anything like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think most Michigan fans were probably rooting against Ohio State, which is fair. I will say Ohio State winning that game and giving Notre Dame a loss, and they still have some tough games to go, might not be the worst thing either when you look at the playoff race. Last year Ohio State was able to sneak in, even with the loss to Michigan. Didn't have to play in the Big Ten championship game. That wouldn't have happened if Notre Dame was better last year, maybe 0 losses or 1 loss. So there was just kind of no one else that could stop them from getting in. They had to be the 4th seed. So if you're Michigan and you're in that spot this year, obviously it's more ideal if you beat Ohio State. But if you're in those shoes this year, you don't want a Notre Dame lingering there either. So you can beat Ohio State. You can't beat Notre Dame. So to get Notre Dame a loss isn't the worst thing. And then for Ohio State to have their coach, basically admit that, he did that, Michigan, he's still thinking about Michigan after that game and how they had a bad half up in Ann Arbor, failing to mention that they got outscored 28-3, should have been worse with the pity whistle in Columbus last year. I think it's kind of a best case. You sit back at the end of the night and you say it's best case. With that said, though, I mean, it was a good win from Ohio State. And, with Kalel McCord, I understand that, he did what he needed to do at the end of that game. I think it was more about their receivers and maybe Notre Dame's mistakes as well, as you kind of hit on with the 10 guys on the field, the prevent defense, 3rd and 19 and all that. But Kalel McCord's probably going to get better throughout the year too. I mean, week 4 last year, J.J. McCarthy's a first-year starter, and he's running all over the place against Maryland, almost turning the ball over. He got a lot better and went into that game at the end of the year against Ohio State, and it was fantastic. So I think Kalel McCord's going to get better too, but he looked a little bit shaky at times there. And I think if you look at things, Michigan and Penn State have the 2 best quarterbacks in the league. I think Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State all have really good defenses. And I'm excited to see these teams once that little mini round robin starts in towards the end of the season, when all those matchups, and we get to put talk of toughness to the side, and we just see these teams play. But until then, I think it's anyone's guess out of those three teams who's going to kind of come out of it. So excited to see what comes of all of that with Penn State also winning very impressively on Saturday night against Iowa as well. They look like a real contender here, as we kind of thought coming into the season.
And I guess my last point on the Ryan Day and Ohio State thing. I mean, I know there was we played one bad half of football the last few years, and you hit on outscoring them 28-3 in the second half of last year's game against Michigan.
There was also the Oregon game. Yeah.
There was the Oregon game. There was the second half of the game in 2021 where I believe Michigan outscores them 28-14. Math is hard.
So he said in his press conference that's the half he was talking about. He said he clarified and said we had one bad half up in Ann Arbor 2 years ago, which I would have thought it would have been the one in Columbus. But he's talking about 2 years ago in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I mean, both those years too, obviously spirals out of control late. They're one-score games in the fourth quarter, but it just goes to show it's another game where if you get this Ohio State team in a four-quarter football game, they are extremely beatable. And Notre Dame had their chances to do that. I look at, and it's not just Michigan either. It's they gave up 18 points in the fourth quarter of that playoff game. Should have beaten Georgia. They'll blame a missed kick on it, but really, you got to finish up. You got to finish the game, and they haven't done enough of that against the Georgias and the Michigans of the world of late. So not to fixate on them, but this kind of leads into my next point, and it's sort of a changing of segments here, but Michigan fans, I don't know, how are we going to view this team week to week, knowing that it is that build up to Penn State in November. And, the way things are right now, even if they get things firing on all cylinders, the way that Michigan plays, it's another week where we watch them, take care of their business. It's a 31-7 game. Last week, 31-6, 30-3 in the opener, 35-7 in week 2. How do we track progress here over the next few weeks? Because this is about the time of year where, and we'll talk about what those guys talked about in the Monday press conference here in a little bit, but week 4 and week 5, those first 2 road trips of the year, has been where we've seen this football team develop its identity and on the offensive line, gain that chemistry. The chemistry, communication has to be top notch, because whether Nebraska is an 18.5 point underdog or not, you're going to come into a place on Saturday where you're going to have 100 or almost 100,000 people. I don't know what the capacity is there, screaming their heads off, going up against you for the first time this year. So I feel like this type of environment, these types of environments coming up, and then obviously it was announced today that Minnesota will be a night game. This is where you're going to start to see what this team really is made of. But get used to the next several weeks of people going, well, yeah, you may have won 34-3, but it was just Nebraska, or it was just Minnesota, or Michigan State's in disarray. You should have done that. So is it just a waiting game to where we see what happens on November 11th through November 25th? Or how do we start to view this? Because everything that this team does is going to be, is it good enough to beat Ohio State? Is it good enough to beat Penn State? Is it good enough they put in the beat Georgia drill? Is it good enough to beat Georgia or beat a playoff team? Because you look at the Washingtons of the world right now, the Oregons of the world right now, they have a different gear to them at this moment. So, Clayton, for you, what does tracking that progress look like?
I mean, I think it's just kind of what we've been doing. I mean, I think there's a couple things with this. And Jim Harbaugh touched on it a week ago, and then it was kind of even more apparent to me and kind of came back to me after this last game against Rutgers. He was back there. He was extremely excited in the post-game press conference. I mean, all sorts of, just smiling, and, he got an applause from some of his guests that he was at the game after he took the podium, and he was laughing about that. And the players were just really excited to have him back and win that game. I think after the Bowling Green game, like Harbaugh said, there was kind of maybe a little bit of too high of expectations going into a game where it's like the goals aren't just to win and stay healthy. The goals are now to win by, whatever the point spread was that game. And I think that it's important, one, to realize that they're getting these wins. They're doing it in pretty dominant fashion. I mean, we're nitpicking a lot of different things with this team. I mean, minus one play, the defense was lockdown against Rutgers. I mean, they allow less than 200 yards outside of that 69-yard touchdown to Christian Dremel on the third play of the game. They hold them scoreless after that play. They get a huge play themselves with, looking at Mike Sanders still right there, who's on the screen, 71-yard pick six. They did a lot of good things. And then offensively too, I mean, the offense is still kind of coming along. I feel like there's still some consistency issues there. They stalled out twice and had to settle for field goal attempts. They go 3 and out on the first drive. There are so few possessions these days where it's kind of hard to judge it, when you just have a couple things happen and then that's 3 of your 8 possessions or whatever it is. But the offense, 6.8 yards per play. I thought the run game was better. I mean, J.J. McCarthy was really good, both through the air and with his legs, and that element of the game with him running now, 51 yards for him. I mean, there was a lot of good from this game. So I think we just kind of have to continue to look at it from that lens. I mean, yeah, it's always going to be looked at nitpicky because this team is number 2 in the country. They're trying to win the national championship, but I think we can't forget too that the number one goal is to win. And when you're doing it against Big Ten competition, it's never going to be fully easy. Even if it is Rutgers or Nebraska or Minnesota, which just lost to Northwestern. I think we just kind of view it how we've been viewing it, and understanding that they're probably going to win most of these games pretty comfortably. But, at the end of the day, and teams will rise up too when you play in those bigger games as well. Every week doesn't have to be good enough to beat Ohio State because you're not playing Ohio State that week. We saw it a year ago, Illinois. They don't play very well. The next week they play the best game they've played in a long, long time. So it's just kind of the way college football goes from a week-to-week basis, I would say.
I like where this team is at right now. And there's been talk about, they can't cover these spreads, or, maybe they're a little too fat and happy. Every game that they've played has pretty much been wire-to-wire domination. And I know what the competition has been. Rutgers, and let me give Rutgers its flowers too. That might be, and we'll see how the rest of the season plays out. That might be, maybe the third best defense they see the rest of the way. Greg Schiano has those guys. I mean, they have Big Ten quality depth. I said this before, but they have all conference caliber talent in each phase of the game on that side of the ball. Their special teams are stout. The punter, they always have some amazing punter that rolls out and kind of makes you tighten up there for a second, thinking he's going to run for a first down. But give Rutgers its credit too. Like, they will. I talked earlier about, I don't know if they're going to be a bowl, if Michigan's played a bowl team yet, but that is a team that looks like, especially in a Big Ten East where Indiana needs 4 overtimes to beat Akron. Michigan State is just in all kinds of disarray right now, and I assume more will be coming when Mel Tucker is officially fired sometime this week. But that Rutgers team, I won't say close, but they are a thorn in your side. This is not 780, 780 Chris Ash squad anymore. Greg Schiano has them playing a respectable brand of ball. So I was really impressed.
They're a competent team now, for sure. And they have some more depth than they've had.
Yeah. So for me, when you look at how this team has played through 4 games, I think they are really close to being about as well-rounded a Michigan team as we've seen. I think that offensive line, once they get that sorted out, which again, I think this is week 5, week 6, that's where we start to see those strides taking place. We talked to Trevor Keegan today, and they said it really was that Penn State game last year, which I think was week 7, where they finally felt like they were locked in and what they were going to be. But again, I think really once they get that run game going consistently, this team is going to be a group that keeps putting its opponents into the torture chamber, because they're going to go on long drives. They're going to get off the field quickly on defense. And I know these up-tempo offenses and what Washington and Oregon and USC and teams like that have been doing have been impressive in the story of the year across the nation this year. This Michigan team is built to beat, not only to be a bully. I love the quote from Blake Corum, "We bully bullies," but also you put someone who's not ready for a street fight on the field with them, and they're going to it's going to be death by a million paper cuts. And I think at some point they're going to start popping more of these big plays. So for me, the fact that they have blown out every single team they've played, and we're still talking about them playing their B- or B games overall as a team, which I think defense has been much, much better than that. They're a really good spot right now. And I think good things will come.
I mean, if you think back, I think sometimes people kind of forget how a season really goes. I mean, Trevor Keegan made the great point today about how that Penn State game was kind of the coming out party, especially for the offensive line. I mean, they rushed for 418 yards in that game. So, I mean, that was just absolutely absurd. It put them back on the radar for the Joe Moore Award. But like he said today, we're not worried about the Joe Moore Award right now. We're trying to mesh right now. And he said he feels like they're really, really close to doing that and breaking out in the games. He said, I was just transcribing what he talked about, and we'll have an article up on that in a little bit. And he said that about 4 or 5 times, it's close, it's coming, I promise that. And you could feel it. You know, Trevor Keegan, he's talked to us many a times over the last several years. He does not BS up there, and you could feel it from him that he's telling the truth on that. You know, I know they're still rotating the tackles, so that's a little bit of a work in progress. But I think at some point here in the next few weeks, we're going to see everything come together at once, because Jim Harbaugh talked about it with JJ playing a little bit of a down game against Bowling Green where the law of averages caught up. I think the law of averages are probably going to catch up where most of the areas or in phases of the game are going to come together all at once for Michigan. And it's the last 2 years where those 2 straight early Big Ten road games have really been kind of the coming out party for this team. You know, and then Penn State to a different extent last year at home. But, you know, Iowa a year ago, and then the Indiana second half when they really blew them out. 2 years ago, it was the Wisconsin game, and then a hard-fought game against Nebraska where you start to kind of form that identity and build that momentum going into the rest of the year. So although the opponents aren't great coming up the next 2 weeks, you still got to be on high alert, and I think that they could be a big kind of pivotal jumping off point for this team. When you go on the road, you build that confidence. You know, it's just you and 74 guys that can travel. You know, it can kind of galvanize a team to win a road game and build its identity. So I think, you know, that this team is in a pretty good spot, and it's not that bad to be winning in blowouts and also knowing that you can do things a lot better. So, you know, they got areas they need to work on, but I feel like they are pretty close. I would agree with Trevor Keegan, and I trust what he's kind of saying specifically too when it comes to the offensive line and in the run game and in the different areas he was talking about.
Well, it's on my mind. I want to shout out someone that we came in contact with over the weekend. A man, I don't know if he watches or listens, and if anyone's watching or listening, please let him know we brought him up. But Ron Rosenthal at a tailgate on Saturday said if you take Michigan's Big Ten opponents at home this year, Rutgers, Indiana, Purdue, Ohio State, spell it out, means RIP Ohio State. So maybe that's prophetic. We'll see what happens. It was clever. Yeah. Ron said you can use that, but you have to credit me for it. So there you go, Ron. Shout out to Ron. I hope this finds its way back to him somehow, because we did remember that. Yep. So before we get into, I want to talk about some of the things that we got from Jim Harbaugh, from Michigan players, JJ McCarthy, Trevor Keegan on Monday afternoon. We will get to that next. We will also take your questions. So get those questions in the queue. Alex Canty, we saw you sent in a super chat. We will lead with yours, so we will get to that one when we get into the questions segment. But we do have just a bit of housekeeping to do. Want to talk about our pals over at Caldera. Gentlemen, listen, we all know that first impressions matter. And if you're looking to take care of your skin, you should be. That's going to be something that's high on your list, is that glow about you, that winning glow, that 4-0 glow about you right now. It's the first thing that someone notices and instantly either thinks that you're way older than you are, or that you just don't care about your appearance. So show them that you do and make a great first impression with Caldera Lab. These guys at Caldera Lab, let me tell you, they have figured out skincare for men so you don't have to. Simply the best products and ingredients to round out your wellness routine. Check out their website. It's terrific. They have the Caldera Lab regimen, which includes 3 products: the Clean Slate, the Base Layer, and the Good. The Clean Slate starts and ends your day. It's a face wash that leaves all skin types refreshed. The base layer is your daily moisturizer to hydrate your skin and jumpstart your day full of confidence. And the good is your multifunctional serum at night that makes your skin look tighter and smoother, as well as reduce the visibility of wrinkles and fine lines. 3.4 million antioxidant units in the serum. No other brand does this better yet. Caldera is the only one that cares enough to let you know about it too. So just for our audience, we have an exclusive offer. This is their best offer available anywhere. Use promo code MICH23 at calderalab.com for 20% off your order right now. Get 20% off your order using code MICH23, MICH23 at calderalab.com and make unforgettable first impressions that lead to the charming words, "You look younger." So that's 20% off at calderalab.com with the promo code MICH23. On Monday nights, we are also brought to you by our pals over at Rogue Shop. We've been talking about Rogue Shop since I feel like the beginning of last football season. And if you're having issues sleeping, chronic pain, anxiety, stress, need to take the edge off of any of that, head on over to rogueshop.com and use promo code The Wolverine to get 10% off your order. Rogue Shop sells CBD, THC, edibles, tinctures, smokables, bath salts, pain creams, topicals, vapes, candles, soaps, more. I'm out of breath just reciting their menu of products. So they grow their own cannabis in their own facility. Everything they put out is made with their own stuff. Their website has a 24/7 chat function where customers can ask anything. They are a true small business. They are disabled veteran owned out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So head on over to rogueshop.com. That's ROGUE shop.com. Use promo code The Wolverine and get 10% off your order. Clayton, Monday night means that we have press conferences to recap. Also, after the fact, the radio show to recap with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, of course, taking the podium this week to preview this first road trip against Nebraska. A lot to kind of sift through coming off of the first, the conference opener. And this is where I think we see Jim, kind of gets a little less fired up in press conferences, maybe more kind of, hunkered down and want to get to work. And we know how anxious he was to get back on the field, but a lot of things to sift through in terms of what he said on Monday. Chris wrote about, the Donovan Edwards question, how he feels about the running back room and the run game. So, as we sit here and go through, also Jim Harbaugh did watch Notre Dame, Ohio State, didn't offer any rebuttal or retort to Ryan Day's comments, but did have the YouTube TV fired up. So he's a YouTube TV guy. For those of you keeping tabs on the brands that he has sort of brought up in these press conferences on Monday, it's McDonald's, it's Panera Bread, it is YouTube TV so far. But what were some of your bigger takeaways from the Jim Harbaugh Monday presser? Because a lot of it, really, before they get into the nuts and bolts of putting the game plan in, is just kind of reflecting on what we saw over the weekend.
Oh, was I just muted?
You might be. You
was
were.
I just muted? Okay. Well, that's my bad. Well, I was just talking to myself then. Nezzy on Twitter, I think at Nezzy21 was just DMing me, and I had the same thought as him when Jim Harbaugh was talking about how he switched over to YouTube TV from DirecTV because it's half the price. He said, you got to get this guy a raise. I mean, they got to get his contract going because he can't even afford DirecTV anymore. So, Michigan, I think, would be wise to do that. But, yeah, I mean, I think that, the Donovan Edwards, him saying there's nothing wrong with Donovan Edwards, which wasn't actually even the question. Like, the question was just, how would you assess where Donovan Edwards is at? So I think, that kind of is a little bit telling in and of itself, where they understand he's struggling. I thought they tried to get him going a little bit more in the run game this past game and, excuse me, as a receiver this past game and getting him the ball in different ways, which I think is smart, using him on different motions, having him on the field with Blake Corum. But you got to get Donovan Edwards going a little bit. And I think he's probably a rhythm type of player. His better performances come when he gets the ball more. So that's going to be hard to do when you have Blake Corum also in the running back room with him. But I thought that was a really interesting comment by Jim Harbaugh. Look, he likes where this team's at. I mean, I know there are a lot of people saying they haven't played their best game yet, and they definitely haven't. But I think he's pretty pleased with most areas. We talked about it with the offensive line, run game probably pretty close, as Trevor Keegan said. So I think he's, and he doesn't touch many of the questions about what do you need to win on the road and whatever. He says you gotta play well, which is pretty standard.
Blocking and tackling.
I was listening to Matt Rule today too. He said the same thing. It's going to come down to blocking, tackling, covering, throwing. It's like, okay, well, I mean, I guess
comes down to playing football, I guess.
We could all just go home. I mean, I think we'll just wait till the game and see what happens. But I mean, I think talking to the players too, they're all excited for this road trip. So it's you can kind of feel the excitement for that, I think, with these guys, and a little bit of a different challenge. You've been comfortable at home 4 weeks in a row. You've had the same schedule. Now you get to, you got to travel the day before. You got to, and not as many people are around. It's just you and the guys there. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we also talked to JJ McCarthy, Trevor Keegan. McCarthy was the first time. I mean, we heard from him after the Bowling Green game, but he comes out on Monday and kind of addresses some of the stuff that led to the 3 interceptions in that game. And then obviously he comes back with not quite a flawless performance against Rutgers, but pretty darn good. He was through for 215 yards and had another 50 yards on the ground. And, just a nice bounce back week from him. He said something along the lines that he just felt like he was putting a little too much pressure on himself to be perfect. I think that there was, in those first 3 games, I think there was an aspect of that team that was frustrated that they weren't winning more because they wanted to put on a show for Jim Harbaugh, who wasn't with them. But McCarthy, I think when you look at how he was able to bounce back this past week, I think it says a lot about the type of guy he is. He's never really been one to let those mistakes snowball on him. That's what made that Bowling Green game so, I don't want to say alarming. It's just it was surprising. And it was what we described at the time as an outlier. And we'll see what happens with him moving forward. But you talk about guys being excited about a road trip this weekend. I mean, he is at the forefront of that. And the nice thing about your quarterback having that trait where, you're kind of frothing at the mouth to have people cheering against you and being in that loud environment. He's been on Michigan teams that have, they've been at Nebraska and won. They've won at Wisconsin. They've won at Ohio State. They've won pretty much everywhere in this conference that they've gone, except for East Lansing over the last few years. And certainly think that will wind up being another box they check off later on this year. We'll see what happens. But, when you have that guy with that type of, I know Jim Harbaugh likes to say gravel in his gut, but, he wants that smoke, so to speak. He wants to be the villain. He wants to lead teams. And I think of that first road trip last year, they go to Iowa, and that opening drive at Iowa, I still think about that. That was maybe their most impressive I don't want to say impressive drive of the year, but to that point, to come out and make that statement on the road in a tough place to play, that's what I expect to see on Saturday, because that's the type of statement maybe the next step of the development of this team is coming out and kind of silencing a crowd right off the bat that isn't your own. Yeah,
that crowd was jumping too. And I mean, it was completely silent. I was in that crowd, if you remember. And so yeah, no, that was fantastic. And that was their first taste of it. And I think, could be similar. I mean, Nebraska's defense is pretty good. They're not going to test Michigan a ton throwing the football. They do have a pretty good run game, but we'll see how it stacks up against a better opponent like Michigan, with kind of running the option. And, we'll see who even is playing quarterback for Nebraska this weekend. But one way they will test Michigan is stopping the run and playing tough in there defensively. And Matt Rule was saying today that he's trying to build their program on very similar characteristics that Jim Harbaugh built Michigan on: toughness, physicality, running the ball, stopping the run. And, you're kind of seeing those qualities, at least, kind of towards the surface here with this Nebraska team, even though they're 2-2 and they have had their fair share of struggles early on. So, I agree. JJ's got the right mentality going in. We've seen them play well on the road in the past. And that's really it's a prerequisite to winning this conference, is you have to, win on the road. Obviously, you got to win a lot of games, most of them, if not all of them, to win the conference. But you have to play well on the road. You have to handle adversity well on the road. And Michigan's done a great job of doing that. They've embraced being on the road. Last year at Iowa, they're waving the pink towels. 2 years ago at Nebraska, they were jumping around to Thunderstruck. They did the jump around the week before that against Wisconsin. They try to turn the opponent's music into their own music, that sort of mentality. And that has just been the absolute formula for this Michigan team the last couple of years. And I expect them to be, jamming out to some AC/DC at the end of the third quarter on Saturday, potentially with a pretty big lead. And when they were doing that 2 years ago, I think they were losing by 3 points. Just shows you the confidence and kind of the bravado of this team and their disposition, which is you got to love to see if you're Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, those guys completely unbothered. I think that was Nebraska after Wisconsin or before Wisconsin that year?
It was after. Yeah.
So, yeah, in back-to-back weeks to see, how they just kind of made that Wisconsin environment their own. And again, what happened 2 years ago, I'm not saying that's predictive of what happens next, but we know that's what the DNA of this group is. And when you go into a game against Nebraska, which I am legitimately excited to kind of dive into what they've been up to, before we do this Thursday show and put out some of our pregame stuff. I think the world of Matt Rule. I think that he will turn things around. Maybe not as quickly as I thought they would. I picked them to win 8 games in our football preview. I kind of look to be eating my words on that right now. But
but look at the West. I mean, they could.
Yeah.
The West is terrible. Like we talked about earlier, too, with the way the Big Ten looks. I think if Maryland were over in the West, I think they might run away with that division. But they're not, and it's wide open. So I don't think the top 4 teams are on that side. So Nebraska may win a few games. I don't think they're going to win it. But they're going to win a couple games. I think that maybe even they're not supposed to. Yeah, look at this.
We'll see. The opportunities there. Illinois is beatable. Northwestern is extremely beatable.
Purdue,
Michigan State. I mean, God, they should have a good time running the option there. That team defensively is just a mess right now. There's a chance there. I'd like to see it because everything. And I'm actually excited. I'm making my first trip to Lincoln this weekend. Excited to kind of soak that in. I've heard that the atmosphere is awesome. I've heard that the fans are awesome. Yeah. I'm not just saying that because our producer is a Nebraska fan, but it's I'm excited to see what they're all about. And when you go on the road for the defense, talk about how it's going to be loud for the offense. The defense is where you can hear a pin drop when the defense is on the field. That's where they can communicate, where you're going to need to be able to communicate, especially against a team that likes to run the option, or a team that's done it really well over the last few weeks. I know, granted, the opponents haven't been the caliber of the first two. It should be, you look for ways that they will be tested in every game, and every game so far has kind of presented a unique challenge. So excited to see about that. Excited to see how this team responds. I think we know there's another gear to them that we haven't seen yet, and but we know it's there. We know that they're capable of unlocking that. And like I said, the last few years, this is about the time of year where they start to put the hammer down a little bit. So we'll see what happens from there. We will go now into questions. The queue is wide open. We have 2 at the front, but anyone who's watching live who wants to get one in there, feel free to fire those up here. We will start with our friend Alex Canty, who so graciously dropped a $4.99 super chat onto the channel, who says, other than Jake Butt's awful music analogy, and I haven't seen this, and Jake's a buddy, so I'm not gonna hammer him for that. What is stopping the Michigan offensive line from moving in harmony is a lack of pin and pull holding back Edwards. So I think this is a twofold question. When you look at the offensive line, I just think they haven't played their best 5 yet, or their best 5 hasn't played together enough. Now, we thought that maybe Ladarius Henderson would get the start. Last week against Rutgers, they went right back to Carson Barnhart. Miles Hinton would later make that switch again in the game. I think Henderson played 30 snaps, if I'm not mistaken. And I would expect this week and I feel like I've said this the last few weeks, this is where, Nebraska or not, Minnesota or not, I don't care who the opponent is. I don't like the idea of going on the road and rotating your tackles, especially Nebraska's played a really, really solid physical brand of defense so far. So I would think that maybe that look with Henderson on the left side, Barnhart on the right is something we see more of. I would hope so. I think that's their best 5. I think that's when things have been at their best in the run game the last few weeks as well. So like to see more of that. And then for Donovan Edwards, I think that we talked about, Ohio State earlier, putting a snowplow on a Ferrari. I think that they need to probably call more plays that benefit Donovan Edwards. We've seen him play for the better part of, 2+ years where he's not a guy that you're going to hammer between the tackles and be able to do the things that Blake Corum does. You got to get him out to the edges. You have to get him out, with nothing but green grass ahead of him. And quite frankly, I mean, I think when you look at some of how he's played and running out of bounds and things like that, I think maybe he might have to take a big hit at some point just to shake off what's left of that rust. I think that he's just kind of overthinking it right now and getting him some easy ones. We talk about calling plays to get your quarterback in rhythm. I feel like Michigan needs to call some plays to get Donovan Edwards in rhythm because he's a guy that seems to build up as his workload increases. So thoughts on both of those, Clayton?
Yeah, it is interesting because it is a small sample size with Ladarius Henderson in there too when you talk about the O-line. So I think it's probably their best combination too, but I mean, they're seeing stuff in practice. I thought Miles Hinton was a little bit better as a run blocker in this past game too. He did allow a sack on third down. Then you kick a field goal, stalls a drive. Not only his fault that happened, but you can't really you don't want that to happen, obviously, and it's a mark against him. So I think you're right. Going on the road when you have to communicate, it's a loud environment. It's kind of tough to do that. And then with Donovan Edwards, I don't think it's just the play calling with him not running pin and pull. I think there are a few plays I will say that he doesn't have much there, and that sucks for him because he doesn't get as many carries as Blake, and sometimes the blocking's not there for Blake, but then the next play it is, and it's an 8-yard gain or whatever it is. Donovan doesn't get as many opportunities, so it is more unfortunate when he doesn't get the blocking. But there are also times where he's running towards guys, whether that's towards the back of his blocker or the defender when there's open space elsewhere. And I mean, you don't run into the congestion, you run to the open space. I mean, obviously that's dumbing the position down way more. There's so much more he needs to think about, and maybe he is overthinking it, as you said. So I think it's a combination of those two things. But I agree that rhythm could be important for him, and maybe it's just going to take maybe it'll be this weekend or maybe it'll be next weekend. Jim Harbaugh said that today too, where maybe in a week we'll be talking about what's wrong with Blake Corum, because Donovan had such a good game. So I don't predict we'll be saying that about Blake Corum, but I do predict that at some point we'll be saying, wow, what a hell of a game from Donovan Edwards. So I think he could just be coming. This kid was hurt in the offseason as well, recovering from an injury, had a couple surgeries. So maybe he's just working back in, but definitely have not been overly impressed with what he's done so far.
I wonder too if Blake Corum is going to be the guy that winds up taking the lion's share of these carries, which if he's run the way that he has, I still think that's going to ultimately be the case. I don't think it's a true 1A and 1B scenario because I think they're different players that you can rely on to do different things. But we talk about looking for more explosives everywhere and on special teams as well. Punt returner still isn't quite sorted out yet. Kick returner, not a whole lot going on there. Do you give him a shot there that he has the ball in the open field and a chance to kind of, gain a full head of steam, maybe make a big play and that, again, it's just, these are discussions I think they'll probably have just in terms of how do we get this guy going? And is it just a matter of taking that first hit or, not that he's taking hits. I mean, they've been trying to run him into the line of scrimmage. Like he's getting hit and he's getting tackled and, it's not, I don't think he's avoiding contact. I just think that.
No, I think the problem is he's not avoiding contact.
Yeah. He wants the him and JJ McCarthy want contact that they don't necessarily need to take. So I'm starting to have a little more questions about that, but not fully concerned. I mean, we are 4 games into what could be a 14 or 15 game season. So not too concerned about that at the moment. Let's go to Theodore Dodge, who says, question, can you guys comment on how you think is the backup QB? This is one that Jim Harbaugh, we didn't get to this. He actually did address this on Monday. There is no clarity there right now. It seems like right now it's still going to be week to week. No one's quite taken and run away with that job. I think if you had to put someone into the game for any stretch of time against Nebraska, it's probably Jack Tuttle. But I don't know that Alex Orji is a quarterback. I don't know that that Jaden Denegal is quite ready for that yet. And Davis Warren just hasn't run away with it. He was kind of the de facto backup, not even really the de facto backup. Like he beat out what was the guy's name last year? Alan Bowman for the job after Cade McNamara was hurt, kind of stayed in that
Which
role.
is impressive, actually. It is impressive he did that. Yeah, he's because Bowman's playing down at Oklahoma State. But okay, here's the thing. Week to week, they don't totally have one yet, but if you're going in right now, if that's the case, I think you go with the experience, right? With Jack Tuttle, as you said. So you're especially on the road. This kid started 5 Big Ten games. He's played in some others at Indiana. So I think you go with him. And I was watching the sideline on Saturday late in the fourth quarter. They ended up keeping JJ in, obviously, which I liked. But Jack Tuttle was the guy getting warm. So I think he probably would be next up right now if it continues to be this sort of stalemate, week to week competition ongoing as it is. And it really was last year too. It seemed like some weeks Alan Bowman would have been next in. And it seems like, towards the end of the year and everything, it was Davis Warren. But yeah, man. And I asked JJ about it today. The emphasis the coaches have been putting on him to get out of bounds, slide, get down. And he started laughing because that has absolutely been something Jim Harbaugh and probably the other coaches have been harping on. He did that better this past Saturday, but he needs to keep doing that because they need him healthy in there. They absolutely need him healthy in there. Otherwise, I don't think this team's going to win those 2 big games on the schedule.
And you're going to have to scrape him off the field even if he does take some kind of hit. His helmet is going to have to fly off, or he's going to have to physically unable to be out there. That guy's a warrior for, as glamorous as that position can be. I have no doubts that JJ McCarthy, again, knocking on wood here, will stay healthy, but it's not a string. It's not a thread you want to tug because I don't know that there's a great option there, whoever emerges. So have time for a few more here. Let's go to Gentle Comedian, who says, is it Henderson or Hinton right now? Man, I don't know. I mean, if you would have asked me this time last week, I would have said, oh, Henderson, easily. He ended the game last week. That's the look that's best. But he came out there and in relief again. And Hinton got the start. And it was kind of just more of the same. So I have to think after 4 weeks of game film, you kind of just have to take it for what it is at this point. If I'm in there, my starting 5 in practice this week from the jump is Henderson, Keegan, Nugent, Zinter, Barnhart, and we're just rolling. Sorry, I had to remember all of them. And you're just rolling with that. And that's the group that you're pumping the crowd noise into the building, and they're practicing, they're figuring it out. I think that's critical this week to have that determined, probably yesterday to have that determined.
Yeah, I think probably the plan going forward, I'm sure, practice will be a big factor this week, especially for Saturday. But it seems like to me, the fact that they went back to that starting 5 this past Saturday is that this is going to be a little bit more of a long-term rotation, maybe not the rest of the season, obviously, but, maybe they will take these next couple games and continue to do that. I think you can get by probably against these teams, but, I think obviously Miles Hinton has done something, and I thought he did play a little bit better in the run game, like I said, on Saturday. So obviously he's done something to earn this time. So, I would trust Sharon more in Jim Harbaugh with this one.
This one's from more of a comment from Account 22, one of our perpetual listeners and followers. He says Mason Graham probably out one more week. Yeah, Mason Graham during the Bowling Green game suffered a thumb injury. He did not play this past week. Jim Harbaugh was pretty forthright about that. And typically when injuries have clarity, he is forthright about it. Won't see him this weekend at Nebraska. Maybe you don't see him against Minnesota. We'll see. But again, I thought Kenneth Grant, all the defensive tackles were outstanding Saturday. But you do miss Mason Graham. He's one of your better defensive players. So, yeah, it should be a quick turnaround for him. Hope to have him back healthy soon. Then I think we'll end on this one. It was a $2 super chat from GoBlue982. It says Donovan is a better wide receiver. Keep Mullings in as the second running back. I don't know. Donovan Edwards needs to get carries out of the backfield because that's going to make everything he does or everything he can do. You have to make that defense think about what the possibilities of a certain play could be. But this was the other thing that Jim Harbaugh brought up Monday, was that he harkened back to Toby Gerhart when discussing what Kalel Mullings did late in that game. Certainly, I mean, has always run physically, but God, he's got an underrated amount of juice and wiggle to his game too. So I don't know that that's going to affect the tandem as much, but I think that certainly if you're going to do more of these power runs, I'm going to see what that guy has instead of continuing to hurl Donovan Edwards at the line of scrimmage for a gain of 1.
Kalel Mullings, man, it was impressive. And I think back to this too when we watch him out there, because I think it was Mike Hart that said it a few weeks ago, where when you think of Kalel, he's really at like a freshman or sophomore in terms of running back years, but he's a senior as a football player at Michigan, which probably, one, it says, hey, he's got room to grow here in this position, and two, you can kind of trust him. You know, he's a veteran guy, and they obviously love what he brings to the table. So I think of it from one, it's great to have that type of guy in there. You know, let's say Blake is out for a portion of this season. You got Donovan Edwards, and if he's not performing well enough, you know, you certainly are going to mix in Kalel Mullings, and you probably would anyway. But long term as well, I think Kalel going into his 5th year next year, he'll still have more eligibility. He's a one more year fund guy, I feel like, for sure. And he's Erdy and Ross. I know Kalel is a super high academic kid, and hey, you know, I think they would pitch to him, take an extra year of grad school, or do a free year of grad school this year at the University of Michigan, get in that business program you want to, and play football. But that's just a strong hunch.
All right. Well, Clayton, I think that's a good place to put a pin in tonight's show. Thank you guys for watching live. We'll have Chris back with us on Thursday when we preview the road trip to Nebraska that all 3 of us will be taking, by the way. So excited for that. Excited to get out on the road for the first time this year. Last 2 weeks really just feel like football season is finally here and finally underway. So excited for that. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Get in on the Wolverine.com's premium content by signing up for $1 for your first month of access. Get in on that deal as well. Thanks to all of our sponsors, those of you watching live, the great questions, producer Megan behind the scenes. So for Clayton Safey, I'm Anthony Broom. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.